You're rich!
Do you honestly think that I would want that after everything you did to me?
Don't you want to be the man you used to be?
Kevin, Lily's husband.
Oh, you're the famous Kevin.
Yes, this is him.
Do you have any idea how hard those are to find? I mean, who gets that kind of money they can just pull out of thin air? All right, good luck.
Mr. Williams, thanks to your skill, you've given me and my men a new lease on life. From now on, you can count on our loyalty, Marshall said sincerely. There's no need for that. As long as you stay out of my way, we'll be fine. He really didn't want to have anything to do with the Alliance now that he knew about its violent and sinister reputation. Before we go, I have some advice for you. You have an unusual skill that's highly valued by some very rich and powerful individuals. The ability to make these herbal supplements could draw attention from the wrong people. He continued in a very serious tone. In order to get their hands on your methods, they would be willing to use any means necessary. You have to think of your family. Make sure that you're well protected. Otherwise, you may end up in the hands of some vile people. Marshall suddenly stopped and said to Kevin ominously, Mr. Williams, please think about it carefully. Kevin frowned when he heard this. If Marshall was trying to scare him, he was doing a good job. Kevin had gotten a taste of what was going on behind the scenes in business, politics, and the criminal underworld. He had to do something to keep Lily and their family safe. Thank you for your advice, Kevin said appreciatively. I'm glad you're going to listen to me, Marshall said candidly. Now I'll take my men to get more of the black fruit for you. After he said this, Marshall headed out the door. Kevin returned to the dining room and saw that Lily, Rachel, and Phoebe were still tied up. Are you okay? He asked them anxiously. Kevin, what's going on? Who were those men? Lily asked curiously. Nothing to worry about. They were looking for the wrong person, but I straightened it all out, Kevin said calmly. Before Kevin had a chance to untie the three women, they all heard the sound of the front door opening. It was Truman Anderson, Phoebe's father. He stood in the doorway with a shocked expression on his face. Kevin, what are you doing here? Then, as he looked over and saw his daughter and the other two women tied up with belts, Truman became infuriated. What the hell is going on here? Truman shouted at the top of his lungs. Truman, this isn't what it looks like, Kevin tried to explain. It's not what it looks like, Truman thundered. What the hell do you think it looks like? Kevin tried to answer, but he had no idea what to say. How could you do something like this to my daughter? Truman yelled as he threw his briefcase at Kevin. Lily wanted to explain that this wasn't Kevin's fault, but Truman wouldn't listen to anyone. He was so furious. Phoebe tried to stand up so she could explain what had happened, but because she had been tied up for so long, her legs had gotten numb. As she tried to get up, she winced and cried out in pain. This only made Truman even angrier. He raised his trembling hand and pointed at Kevin, growling, I can't believe I trusted you to work in my company. Please, this is all a misunderstanding, Kevin explained as he helped Truman to sit down on the sofa. Then he immediately went over to the three women and undid the belts that were still tied around their wrists and ankles. Kevin felt that it was hopeless to try to explain, so he just took Lily and Rachel and left the house. Truman was still trying to catch his breath. He turned to his daughter and asked her, Phoebe, tell me honestly, did Kevin do this? Dad, what are you talking about? You've really misunderstood what happened, Phoebe reassured him. After taking a moment to catch his breath and compose himself, Truman finally said, Phoebe, I only know what I saw. Dad, can you please listen to my explanation? A bunch of hoodlums broke through the front door while we were making lunch. They tied us up and tried to beat up Kevin. He was about to explain the rest to us when you came in. But believe me, it wasn't Kevin's fault. Truman still wasn't convinced, but he trusted his daughter. Well, if you say so, but that's not what I saw. His voice trailed off as he tried to accept her explanation. Dad, you still don't believe me? Phoebe said in an exasperated tone. She stomped her foot on the floor in frustration. Her father had Kevin all wrong. He was a huge help with her appraisals, and he even got someone like Drake to back down and leave the store peacefully. Actually, even though she trusted Kevin, there was still something mysterious about him. Truman let out another long sigh. He wasn't sure what to think. While this was going on, Kevin was driving Lily and Rachel back into the city. He simply didn't understand Truman's reaction when he walked into the house. "I didn't know Truman had such a quick temper," Kevin said to Lily. "What are you talking about? The whole thing was your fault." "How could it be my fault? I didn't tie you up," Kevin said helplessly. Rachel, who had been very quiet until now, suddenly said, "It's getting late. Just drop me off at the corner up ahead. I'll call for a ride home." "Don't worry, Rachel. It's no trouble at all. Kevin can take you home while I stop by the market to buy some vegetables." Lily then turned to Kevin and asked him, "What do you want for dinner? I'm cooking." Kevin was very shocked to hear her say that. They'd been married for almost 3 years, and he couldn't remember when Lily had ever offered to cook. This put Kevin in a good mood, and he quickly headed for the market. When they got there, Kevin said to Lily, "Wait for me here after you're done. I'll pick you up right after I drop Rachel off." When Lily was there, Rachel always felt a little more at ease, but when she was alone with Kevin, she immediately clammed up, unsure how to act. "Don't be too nervous. I'm not that scary," Kevin said with a smile as he pulled out of the parking lot. "I'm not nervous," Rachel replied quickly. Ever since she found out about Kevin's true identity, every time she thought about how she'd always treated him, she felt a little ashamed and regretted her actions. Kevin glanced at her in the rearview mirror. He had an idea about what she was thinking. "Don't worry about the past. You and Lily are good friends, and you were just protecting her because you thought she was suffering with me." "No, I didn't," Rachel replied so quietly he could barely hear her. "I know you're good for Lily, so I want to give you some great news. I'm getting ready to open the biggest hotel in Chicago, and I've decided to ask you to be the vice president." "Really?" Rachel replied excitedly. "Of course it's true, but I need to know soon, so please don't take too long to decide." He'd already made an agreement with Mitchell Cook. The two of them were going to join forces and go into the food and beverage industry in Chicago. "Just don't disappoint me, and if you accept my offer, I'll give you 3 times the industry standard." Rachel was dumbfounded and stammered. "Am I dreaming? You really want me to be the vice president?" "There's only one condition. I want you to help me keep an eye on Lily. If any man tries to get close to her, you must let me know immediately," Kevin said very seriously. "I won't let you down," Rachel replied excitedly. At that very moment, at the Jones mansion, Grandma Jones was sitting with the top members of the family. She looked despondent. "I called everyone here today to discuss something that's very important for our future. Lily now has a controlling share in our company. Does anyone have an idea what we can do about this?" Grandma Jones had been miserable ever since Tyler gave Lily 60% of the company's shares. Lily had instantly replaced her as the most important member of the family. But what could Grandma do about it? "Grandma, you can talk to Lily nicely and ask her to give you some of her shares," Jason said with an evil smile. "Even if she gave me 10%, she would still have half the shares." "Don't worry. When Lily signs the transfer paperwork, we can slip another document underneath the contract." Before Jason finished speaking, they all knew what he meant. It was devious, but it might work. "Grandma, don't forget that Tyler Dawn gave Lily an import-export company." This was actually what Jason hated the most. He really didn't know why Tyler had been so generous to Lily. Grandma Jones perked up when he said this. If she could get back the company shares, she could start another company and finally put the Jones family back on top. 5 days later, in the CEO's office of Williams Media, Kevin looked intently at the documents on his desk. "Mr. Williams, as soon as the market opens this morning, our company's shares are expected to drop by 20%. "What's behind this?" Kevin asked as he looked at the documents and then at his computer screen. "About 3 days ago, someone started to manipulate the shares of the largest companies in Chicago," Miss Wilson explained. Kevin sat back slowly in his chair and muttered, I can't believe they were able to set this up in just a few days. It must have taken a lot of work." "Mr. Williams, do you know what happened?" Miss Wilson asked in surprise. Ever since Kevin took over Williams Media, he hadn't been very active in his role as CEO. He had been busy with a lot of other things, from antique appraisals to herbal supplements. Miss Wilson helped to keep things going smoothly, as she always did. But Miss Wilson never thought that Kevin, who was hardly ever in his office, would know anything about the matter. "Please go down to the first floor and wait. We'll have a few important visitors stopping by." "Yes, sir." Since Kevin didn't give any more details than that, Miss Wilson naturally didn't dare to ask who they were. After she left, Kevin slapped his desk and took out his phone to make a call. "Hello, Kevin. What's the matter?" "Uncle Thomas, you know very well what's the matter. There's no point in hiding it." "That's right, Kevin. The Williams family did this." "Why?" "You know perfectly well why we did this, Kevin. Your performance lately has made everyone unhappy. Your grandfather thinks that you're getting carried away. You need something to bring you down to earth and keep you from following the wrong path. This is for your own good." "How can you even say that? Aren't you afraid that I'll take back the $3 billion that I lent the family?" "Kevin, if you want your money back, I can transfer it to you right now. However, if you want to use it to save Williams Media, it won't work," Thomas said gravely. "This is your grandfather's decision. I advise you to come back and apologize to your family. We can still work this out." It looked like Kevin didn't have any options left. When Kevin got to his office at Williams Media, he found out that the company's shares were about to tank. He suspected that the Williams family was behind the manipulation of stocks in the largest companies in Chicago. He called his Uncle Thomas to find out if he was behind it. The family wanted him to come back to New York to talk it out with his grandfather. Kevin didn't answer him, he just hung up the phone. Then he tapped on his desk while he thought about what to do. He couldn't understand how the Williams family had suddenly found enough money to do this. Their situation was desperate. After thinking for a while, Kevin decided to call Mitchell Cook, Adriana Wright, Gilbert Rhodes, and the others to come to an emergency meeting at his office. Within an hour, they'd all arrived. "Mr. Williams, what's going on? Why did the Williams family suddenly launch this financial attack on Chicago?" Adriana was the first to ask.
"With their influence, they'll have no trouble taking over all the major industries in the city. But the way they're doing it, they'll destroy the entire economy," Cook said bitterly. As the most prominent business leaders in Chicago, they naturally found who was behind this madness, but they didn't understand the reason behind it. Gilbert Rhodes suddenly stood up, looked directly at Kevin, and asked, "Mr. Williams, are they doing this to get even with you?" It's useless to dwell on that now. The important thing is that the Williams family has already made their move, Kevin said stoically. Hearing this, Cook and the others were unsure how to respond to the threat. "Let's not get pessimistic. The reason I called you here today is to discuss countermeasures," Kevin said confidently. "Mr. Williams, just tell me what to do. We'll support you with all we've got, no matter what," Emo Squire said very frankly. "That's right. Without you, we wouldn't be where we are today," Adriana said optimistically. Mitchell Cook and Gilbert Rhodes didn't say anything, but they nodded in agreement. Kevin thought for a moment and said, "Although the situation looks critical, it doesn't mean that the Williams family will definitely succeed. The first step we need to take is to stabilize the stock market. Let's use our money to push back at them." "Kevin is right. We definitely can't avoid it. They're playing rough, so we will too. Even if it kills us, we'll make sure they don't get out of this unhurt," Mitchell Cook said forcefully. Within an hour of the meeting, everyone in the stock exchange was shocked. As everyone watched, the Williams Group stepped up and invested $3 billion. After that, Mitchell Cook, Adriana, and the others followed suit. Each of them took billions of dollars and poured everything they could into the stock market. The enormous transfers of funds attracted everyone's attention. When the stock market closed in the afternoon, they had managed to stabilize Chicago's financial position. Cook and the others promised that they would follow Williams Media's lead and match Kevin's actions. They vowed to protect Chicago's financial base
even if it cost them their lives and their fortunes. That night, the Jones family held a meeting in their mansion. "How much of our stock fell today?" Grandma Jones asked with a gloomy expression. "Grandma, our shares dropped by 60%, one of her nephews said with a depressed look on his face. "Grandma, I have a suggestion, but I don't know if everyone will agree." "Oh, what do you suggest?" "Didn't Williams Media lead the way today? Why don't we take half of our shares and buy into their company?" Jason explained carefully. "That way, however this turns out, we'll at least be able to maintain half of our wealth." "That's right. We can ask Williams Media for help," one of his uncles replied. But they still weren't sure if Williams Media would go along with this. They also weren't sure they'd be able to work together. Kevin, who was standing next to Lily, frowned slightly when he heard this. He instantly understood Jason's ultimate goal. "Lily, what do you think about Jason's proposal?" "It's up to you to decide, Grandma," Lily said with a sullen look on her face. The Jones Corporation shares were dropping in value and they were practically bleeding money. They didn't see any other way to stop it. "All right, since you said that the decision is up to Grandma, then you'll have to contribute 50% of the company's shares," Jason said deviously. "Jason, what do you mean? What right do you have to make my wife turn over all her shares? 60% of the company's shares are now in Lily's hands. If she doesn't do this, then who will?" Jason said with a sour look on his face. "If she still considers herself to be a member of the Jones family, then she needs to do this right now." "Jason, you have no shame." "How dare you disagree with me?" Jason grumbled. "From what you're saying, it sounds like Lily isn't willing to go along with this plan anyway." "Lily, what do you think we should do?" Grandma Jones asked in a slow, calculating voice. "Grandma, as long as you think it's appropriate, I have no objections." "No!" Kevin shouted. "What did you say?" Grandma Jones said as she looked at Kevin angrily. "If we must use our shares for this transfer, Grandma, you should contribute 20% and my wife should give 30%. Moreover, after the crisis is resolved, the shares should revert to their respective owners," Kevin said matter-of-factly. "How dare you?" Grandma Jones yelled as she banged her fist on her armrest. "Do you have the right to speak here? Get out!" Grandma Jones stared at Kevin menacingly. Kevin suddenly sneered and said, "You people are really funny." "What are you laughing at?" "I'm laughing at the Jones family. You do consider yourselves to be a family, don't you? How could you be so desperate? First, you want to use my wife and exchange her for Merriweather shares. Now that the shares are in her hands, you want to trick her into giving them back to you. Can't you see how funny that is?" Everyone stared at him awkwardly, but none of them refuted him because they knew he was telling the truth. "Someone, throw him out of here! Who's willing to take the first swing?" Kevin knew they wouldn't try anything. They'd all seen how he pulverized Merriweather in just a couple of minutes. "All right, Kevin," Lily said as she suddenly stood up and took him by the hand. She turned to Grandma Jones and said, "Grandma, it's getting late. Let's talk about this again tomorrow." When Kevin got to the office the next day, Miss Wilson had already been waiting for him for half an hour. "Sir, many of our senior executives want to have a meeting with you." "Okay. Have them wait for me in the meeting room in half an hour." Next, Kevin checked the company's stock situation on his computer. As the markets opened, their share prices fell by 10%. By now, they had already lost hundreds of millions. Kevin sighed slightly and took out the bracelet that he'd bought from Reuben at Phoebe's antique store. What's the use? While he was turning the bracelet over and over in his hand, he started to feel more relaxed and confident. That's odd, he thought to himself. Then he took a closer look at the stone that was set in the bracelet. It wasn't a green emerald at all. It was actually a green tourmaline. How could he have made such a rookie mistake? But it did explain why he was drawn to it in the first place. Kevin slowly put the bracelet on the table. After thinking for a moment, he decided to call Officer Emmett to ask her opinion. After all, she had set him on the path to making herbal remedies. Maybe she knew something about this too. "Hello, Kevin? What do you want?" Officer Emmett answered in a surprised tone. "I was wondering what you might know about green tourmaline." "I was wondering when you might ask me something like that," she said frankly. "A lot of people believe that certain stones can help you to focus your energy to relax or work on your health. Things like that." "Interesting," Kevin smiled and said. "I felt drawn to a tourmaline bracelet the other day at the antique store. What do you think?" "Why should I tell you?" Officer Emmett said jokingly. "I'm serious," Kevin insisted. "I'll tell you, but you need to say please," Officer Emmett replied mischievously. "Come on, I'm serious." Kevin was starting to get frustrated. He knew she was just teasing, but he didn't have a lot of time for this today. "Come on, just once. What's the magic word?" Officer Emmett tried again. "Okay, please," Kevin said in a very low voice. "I'm sorry I can't hear you. Could you speak up?" Officer Emmett said in a satisfied tone. Kevin took a deep breath and said very clearly, "Please." "That's better," Officer Emmett said. "Come to the downtown Luxbank's office in an hour. Don't forget to bring the bracelet. I'll explain everything to you then. See you later." She hung up before Kevin could say goodbye. Miss Wilson came into Kevin's office as soon as he put his phone in his pocket. "Mr. Williams, all the senior executives are waiting for you in the conference room." Kevin nodded and left the office. This was the first high-level meeting that Kevin had held since he took over Williams Media, so a lot of them didn't have a great impression of his leadership abilities. As soon as he walked into the conference room, one of the vice presidents stood up and said, "Mr. Williams, we can't fight this anymore. Even if we win, we'll suffer heavy losses." The executives were all panicked about what the Williams family was doing to their company. They were willing to give up and let them buy them out if that was what it took to save Williams Media. Kevin sat patiently and listened to them. Finally, Kevin's eyes swept across the room before he slowly said, "Are you all done?" "Sir, I strongly recommend that we give in," one of the older, more experienced executives said firmly. "How much money did the Williams family offer you to make you react like this?" When he said this, the entire meeting room grew quiet. Kevin leaned forward in his chair and looked everyone in the eye one by one before he said, "I came to this meeting today to tell you something. If anyone feels that fighting the Williams family is a mistake, please leave now." Then Kevin sat back in his chair feeling very confident and relaxed. He knew that they would get through this, but he just wasn't sure how. But Kevin was confident that they could get through this. Kevin turned to Miss Wilson and said, "You're authorized to transfer any amount of funds necessary. Our first goal is to stabilize the stock market as much as possible." After he said this, Kevin got up and left. He went straight down to the parking garage and got in his to drive to the downtown branch of Luxbank. When he got to the bank a while later, he was lucky to find some street parking. Kevin decided to leave the bracelet in his car before he walked inside. Because of the volatile stock market over the past few days, many people were worried about losing their life savings, so there was a crowd in the bank trying to withdraw their money. Kevin went straight to the VIP area because he figured Officer Emmett would be waiting for him there. But before he got to the teller's window, he was stopped by a staff member. "Hello, sir. How may I help you?" the woman said with a smile. "I don't need any help, thanks," Kevin said. "I'm just looking for someone." Judging by Kevin's clothes, the woman immediately determined that he was just an ordinary customer and wasn't qualified to go to the VIP section. "Sorry, sir. These windows are reserved for VIPs. No one else is allowed in here. If you're looking for someone, you can wait over there by the door," the woman said icily. "I also have some business to take care of. Can I go ahead?" Kevin asked politely. "Sir, you can go to the regular customer area to do your business," she said with a fake smile. Then the woman thought to herself, the customers in the VIP area are all worth over $1 million. Kevin, who was wearing sloppy ordinary clothes, probably didn't earn more than $20,000 a year. "I'd like to make a withdrawal," Kevin said helplessly. He was starting to get irritated. "You can make a withdrawal from the ATM by the entrance," the woman said impatiently. She didn't want to waste any more time with Kevin. Kevin frowned. He thought that he was pretty handsome. How come he kept getting this kind of reaction from people? Then he took a deep breath and looked at her name tag. I'll just stand here and wait, Miss Gray. It shouldn't be long, okay? No, sir, this is the VIP area. I'm afraid you're disturbing our customers, Miss Gray said in disgust. Please move along. Their conversation was starting to attract attention. The VIP customers were annoyed by his intrusion. How could a poor man like him dare to come into their private section? Kevin took another deep breath and said to her, You're giving me no choice. I've decided that I'm going to withdraw all my money from your bank. I'm sorry, but you don't seem to understand. There's an ATM in the lobby, she said impatiently. If you don't leave this area immediately, I'll be forced to have you removed by security. Miss Gray, I'd like to withdraw $2 million in cash immediately, Kevin said as he took out his bank card and slapped it in her hand. The VIP onlookers started to whisper to each other. Did he really say he was withdrawing $2 million? He's not fooling anyone. Just look at how he's dressed. She looked disdainfully at the bank card in her hand. There wasn't even a name on it. Just as she was about to throw the card out, the bank manager happened to walk by. When he saw the black card, he was so unnerved that his legs got weak.
Miss Gray, what's going on here? The manager asked her abruptly.
Mr. Johnson, this man has been causing trouble, she explained. Of course, she didn't forget to give Kevin a snooty look. Johnson was so angry that he muttered to himself,
We really have to do better training.
He paused and then explained,
This is a black card. There isn't another one in all of Chicago.
The VIPs who were watching the scene were shocked, and the employee felt incredibly awkward. Sir, are you sure you aren't mistaken? She asked hesitantly.
Nonsense, Miss Gray,
Johnson said as he took back the card and walked over to Kevin.
Sir, my name is Evan Johnson. I'm the manager of this branch. It would be our pleasure to serve you,
he said apologetically, trying very hard not to let his voice quiver. In all his years working for the bank, he had never seen one of these cards. I don't need any help, thank you. I'm just making a withdrawal, Kevin said as he sneered at the rude employee. Am I qualified to stand here now? Sir, I'm so sorry, Miss Gray replied ever so politely. She was mortified.
Sir, please accept our apologies for this misunderstanding. If you need anything at all, please let me know, Johnson said with a big smile.
I've already told Miss Gray how much I'd like to withdraw, Kevin said nonchalantly. I'm sure she can handle things now.
Okay,
Johnson said amiably. Then he turned around and reprimanded her.
What are you standing here for? Take care of the transaction right away.
Yes, sir, she said as she walked behind the counter.
Sir, please, come with me to wait in the private room, Johnson invited him.
Their attitude had completely changed, and the VIPs who had witnessed the spectacle were speechless. When they got to the private room, Kevin sat down casually on the sofa and crossed his legs. Johnson smiled and walked over to the cappuccino machine and offered Kevin a coffee. A few minutes later, the embarrassed employee came into the room struggling to carry a large canvas bank bag with both hands. Sir, the $2 million withdrawal you requested, Miss Gray said apprehensively. She could barely look Kevin in the eye. She was so embarrassed by how rudely she treated Kevin when he walked in. You know, I don't really think I need to carry around that much cash. How about if you take out $500 and put the rest back in the vault? Kevin said as he leisurely sipped his cappuccino. Yes, sir, she replied. She knew that Kevin was just with her, but she realized she deserved it. Kevin slowly walked out of the VIP room accompanied by Mr. Johnson and Miss Gray. He stuffed the $500 in his pocket. As he stepped into the lobby, Officer Emmett walked over to him and asked, Kevin, what are you doing here? Didn't you want me to meet you here? I figured as long as I'm at the bank, I might as well make a withdrawal. Kevin smiled. Officer Emmett nodded slightly, but then she noticed that Kevin was coming out of the VIP area. But what were you doing at the VIP window? Officer Emmett asked as she looked him straight in the eyes. She was here to do some banking too, but she had to do it at an ordinary window. Officer Emmett knew very well that the bank's VIP room was only accessible to millionaires. Maybe they let me use it because the regular lines were getting too long, Kevin suggested as he shrugged his shoulders. That seemed to make sense to Officer Emmett, so she decided to change the subject. Kevin, please don't misunderstand Blair's actions. He didn't do any of that on purpose. Before she could finish, Kevin interrupted her. I'm not here to talk about him. Let's find a place to sit down so you can explain to me what's going on with that bracelet. Suddenly, there was a scream from the lobby. We're being robbed! The bank's front door was kicked open by 5 men in black. One of them fired his gun at the ceiling and shouted, Everyone, on the floor! Put all your valuables on the floor in front of you and don't look up, the head bank robber shouted. If you value your lives, you'll do as we say. The shocked customers hit the floor and tried to follow the thieves' instructions. Officer Emmett was about to react, but saw that there were too many armed robbers and she didn't want any innocent people to get hurt. Kevin pointed out with a smirk. Should we go stop them? No, if they're brazen enough to come down here in the daytime, they're probably prepared for resistance. There are too many innocent people here. We need to wait for a better opportunity. Go to the vault and bring back $8 million in unmarked bills. And don't try anything you'll regret. Well, we don't have that much money right now. The robber responded by shooting Johnson in the thigh. I won't say this again. $8 million in cash right now. Too many customers have taken out their money the past few days, plus a lot of companies have withdrawn their funds to put into the stock market. We really don't have $8 million in the vault, Johnson said as he gritted his teeth in pain. One more word and you're a dead man. Just as he was about to pull the trigger, Officer Emmett stood up holding her badge in her hand. Chicago PD, you're all under arrest. Put down your weapons and place your hands on your heads. Kevin, who was still lying on the floor, looked up at Officer Emmett and shook his head in disbelief. What the hell is wrong with her? Didn't we agree to wait for a better chance? All the men in black turned to look at Officer Emmett. The group's leader looked around the room and then looked back at her. Sure, officer. Then he paused and said, Wait a second. Why should we listen to you? Oh my God, I thought she had better judgment than this. No backup and no gun. Why should they listen to you? You two go and tie her up and throw her into the car. He started walking towards Officer Emmett while he said this. As the 2 men moved in to tie her up, Officer Emmett spun around and made a savage sidekick to the first one's gut. Then she spun in the other direction and threw a high snap kick to the other man's head. A gunshot rang out and dust floated from the ceiling. You're as good at fighting as you are beautiful, the man smiled creepily and said. Let's see which is faster, your foot or my gun. He pointed to all the people lying on the floor and threatened. We've got 5 guns. How many of them do you think you can save? Kevin jumped up and said to Officer Emmett, Go and check his injuries. Leave these guys to me. By the time Officer Emmett realized what was going on, Kevin had already leapt in front of the man and kicked the gun out of his hand. Then he threw a lightning-fast punch to the man's head. He dropped like a sack of cement. Stay back, the man shouted as he saw that Kevin was getting close enough to reach him. In fear for his life, he started to aim towards the hostages. Kevin saw that the gun was pointed at a little girl who was lying on the floor next to her mother. He knew this wasn't good and sprang between the man and the little girl just as he pulled the trigger. I told you to shoot me. Why did you shoot at someone else? What the hell is wrong with you? Don't you know how to rob a bank? Kevin, Officer Emmett shouted nervously. Why don't you put down the gun and face me like a real man? Kevin said with a mocking smile. Shut up, the man yelled as he turned toward Kevin. But he was so nervous that he accidentally pulled the trigger again. But luckily, the man's shot was aimed at the floor and didn't hit anyone. In desperation, the man suddenly grabbed a little boy who was next to him. Let's talk this over. Talk? There's nothing to talk about. You're going to stay right here and we're going to leave. The one nearest to Kevin immediately hit him on the head with the butt of his gun. That's what you get for interfering. Blood immediately started flowing down from Kevin's head. Fortunately, he was in pretty good condition, so the blow didn't knock him out. The gang's leader turned to his men and ordered them.
You guys go and put all the money in your backpacks.
A minute later, the 5 of them ran out of the front door with 5 bags of money and their young hostage. After the men left, everyone was relieved, except the boy's father. And Officer Emmett and Kevin knew that it wasn't over yet. "Kevin, are you all right?" Officer Emmett asked Kevin with concern. "I'm fine," Kevin said as he tore off a piece of his shirt and tied it to his head to stop the bleeding. "Shall we chase after them?" "I'll chase after them. You get to the hospital," Officer Emmett said worriedly. She had been very impressed by Kevin's courage under fire. "I'll be okay. Let's go," Kevin said to her as he headed towards the door. "They stole all that money and still took a hostage," Officer Emmett complained as she followed Kevin to his car. "That boy is so young. Even if we manage to save him, I'm afraid he'll never get over it." She was right. The young boy was in grave danger. "They were probably afraid that the police would follow them, so they grabbed a hostage," Kevin said calmly as he drove after them. "Call 911 immediately and ask them to check the surveillance cameras along State Street. Also ask them to send backup, or I'm afraid we won't be able to save the boy." "I know. You do realize I'm a cop, right?" Officer Emmett replied as she was pulling out her phone to call the station. "Hello? It's Lieutenant Emmett." She gave instructions to the sergeant who took her call, and then she turned her attention back to Kevin, who had just been shot a few minutes ago. About 10 minutes later, the men thought they might be getting away with their robbery. As they raced up Fullerton, one of them said excitedly, "Man, we hit the jackpot this time."
Bullshit. We could have done a lot better. Who would have thought that such a big bank wouldn't even have a lousy $8 million? The man said bitterly.
Suddenly, the driver looked in the rearview mirror and started to panic.
"Hey man, we got a tail. I think it's the guy from the bank."
"Damn it! How's that even possible?"
"What are you panicking for? There are only 2 of them. Just him and that cop," the leader said coolly. "Just keep your foot on the gas and stick with the plan. As long as we get to the boat, we'll be fine."
He was acting like he was calm, but the panic showed in the man's eyes. Kevin had been shot and hit on the head, but he kept coming after them. What kind of man was he?
"What if we get caught?" "Have you already forgotten what I told you?" the man answered grimly. "Maybe that guy can fight, but we've got a hostage."
While they were discussing their options, Kevin and Officer Emmett were coming up with a plan of their own. "Kevin, hurry up and drive faster. Let's not lose them," Officer Emmett said impatiently. She couldn't believe that she was actually chasing the suspects in a... It was probably worth more than what the robbers had stolen from the bank. "Don't worry, we're almost at the lake. They'll have to stop soon," Kevin replied as he focused on the big black car ahead of them. Then he thought for a second and said, "You'd better let your backup know that we're heading for the marina. I'll bet they plan to switch to a speedboat." He knew his car could catch up with them in 2 seconds, but if he got too close, he couldn't guarantee that they wouldn't hurt the hostage. Officer Emmett noticed the bright red stain on Kevin's shirt. She asked him earnestly, "How are you holding up? That looks pretty bad." "It's nothing serious. I can hold on for a while longer," Kevin replied calmly. "This probably isn't the right moment, but there's something I want to know." Officer Emmett stared at Kevin and asked, "You could have dodged that bullet, but why did you put yourself in danger like that?" Kevin didn't reply to her question. He just kept driving, keeping just far enough behind the robbers so that they wouldn't get jumpy. When they got near the marina, the men grabbed their hostage and ran from the car. Kevin put the bracelet inside his jacket. Maybe it could at least deflect a bullet. Officer Emmett and Kevin jumped out of the car. Just as they were about to catch up with them, the group of men suddenly stopped.
"Stay back or the hostage is dead,"
the head robber turned around and shouted. The thieves were getting angry. One of them said,
"If it wasn't for these 2 bastards, we'd already be counting our money." "We can count it after we kill them," the other man said optimistically.
"Cut the crap. Throw down your weapons, let the child go, and put your hands on your heads. This is your last warning," Officer Emmett shouted.
"Stay where you are," the leader hollered back. "Take another step and he's finished."
The man pointed his gun right at the kid's back while he used him as a shield. The little boy was seriously frightened and he couldn't stop crying. Let the child go, you worthless... Officer Emmett growled. Kevin patted Officer Emmett on the shoulder and took a step forward. So, you tough guys are using a child as a human shield. I'm really impressed. Very manly, Kevin said sarcastically. Shut up. If it wasn't for you, we'd have been out of that bank in 2 minutes and we wouldn't even need a hostage, the man said viciously. In the past few years, he and his gang had committed dozens of robberies, but they'd never failed. Until now. Kevin had messed up their plans. I'll tell you what. If you want a hostage so bad, take me, Kevin said in a very serious tone. When Officer Emmett heard him say this, she turned her head in shock. She looked at Kevin and didn't know what to say. So, you want to be a hero. You got it, the gang's leader said angrily. Come on, raise your hands over your head and walk over here. Slowly. If you play any tricks, you know what I'll do. As soon as the man finished speaking, Kevin started to sneer. He slowly raised his hands and walked toward him. Kevin! Officer Emmett shouted in shock. Before this incident, Officer Emmett would have never thought that Kevin would risk his life to save a little girl and then offer himself as a hostage for a little boy. Why did everyone in the Jones family keep calling him a bum? When Kevin was less than 6 feet away, the man let go of the little boy. The kid immediately ran towards Officer Emmett, still crying uncontrollably. Come over here, the man roared at Kevin. Don't worry, I didn't bring any weapons with me, Kevin retorted as he continued walking towards the man. Then Kevin made his move. He punched the man in the center of his chest and sent him flying backward. His men were shocked and they definitely didn't want to face Kevin again. They just snatched their leader and ran away as quickly as they could. After they were gone, Kevin grabbed his side and complained, Damn, this hurts. When he punched the bank robber, the wounds on his head and side had started to bleed again. Kevin, lie down and breathe calmly, Officer Emmett said as she carried the little boy over to him. Then she took off her jacket and held it against Kevin's side to stop the bleeding. Help is on the way, she reassured him. That's okay. I'll just lie here and bleed for a while, Kevin said jokingly. I'm sorry I got you into this, Officer Emmett answered quietly. She was feeling pretty guilty because she was, after all, a police lieutenant, but she had ended up letting Kevin do her job today. That's okay, Kevin said. It's not like I had anything else to do. Just hang in there, Officer Emmett said as she nodded her head. What are we going to do now? Kevin asked in confusion. Those guys are probably halfway across Lake Michigan by now. Even if you wanted to, I don't think you could catch up to them. They can wait. Let's get you some help first. I'll call the bank to let them know the kid's all right, Officer Emmett said calmly. That's all right, the little boy said. Just send me back to the bank. This man needs to go to the hospital. Kevin and Officer Emmett were stunned to hear the kid say that. I didn't know a child could have so much common sense, Kevin said in surprise. Me neither, Officer Emmett said with a smile. They relaxed a little when they finally heard the sirens approaching. Unfortunately, while fighting with the leader of the gang, Kevin reopened the wounds on his head and his side. As the police and ambulance approached, Kevin said to Officer Emmett, I think you should take the boy back to the bank. After all this, he needs to be with his family as soon as possible. I can wait, the little boy said stubbornly. You should get to the hospital right away. Officer Emmett patted the boy on the head and said, I'll send you back in a police car. How would you like that? You know, I don't even know your name. I'm Stevie. Then his eyes lit up and he asked, Can they use the siren? Officer Emmett laughed and said, We'll see. She was trying to hide it, but she was pretty worried about Kevin's gunshot wound. Just then, the squad cars pulled up and a few officers walked over toward them cautiously with their weapons drawn.
Chicago PD, please identify yourselves.
You missed the bad guys by like 10 minutes. Where the heck were you? Officer Emmett said as she showed him her badge.
Oh, Lieutenant Emmett, the cop responded as he put his gun back in his holster.
Geez, you guys are slow, Officer Emmett said disapprovingly. Then she turned to the little boy and said, Stevie, these nice officers will take you back to your family. I need to get Kevin some help. Okay. At the same time, he didn't forget to wave goodbye to Kevin. Where's that ambulance? Officer Emmett asked one of the officers. As soon as she asked, she saw the EMTs running toward her and Kevin. I really don't need all of this fuss. I have a lot of work to do. When Officer Emmett heard him say this, she wanted to slap him. Your health comes first. If you don't treat this wound now, you'll probably get an infection. That'll cost you even more time and money. Now let them check you out. I still don't want to go to the hospital. The lead paramedic introduced herself to Kevin. I'm Erica Diaz. Just remain calm and we'll get you back on your feet in no time. She and her assistant examined Kevin's wounds and lifted him onto a stretcher to load him into the ambulance. When they checked his vitals, they were surprised to see that he wasn't in shock. You're pretty lucky. It looks like the bullet passed right through. She rolled Kevin onto his side to be able to disinfect the exit wound. I really don't want to go to the hospital, Kevin told her. This was an unusual request for this kind of injury, so Diaz thought for a few seconds and then answered. I can stitch you up and give you some IV antibiotics, but I really recommend that you get it checked out to make sure it didn't hit any internal organs. It doesn't look like it did, but you never know. Then she examined the cut on his scalp and said, Your head wound looks worse than it is. Fortunately, you're not showing any signs of a concussion. Why don't you listen to my advice? Officer Emmett said disappointedly. Just let a doctor take a look. I promise I'll go if it gets worse, but I just don't have the time to deal with a hospital right now. And I can't go home like this either. Lily would freak out, Kevin joked. You're such a... Officer Emmett snapped at him. Okay, you can crash out in my living room, but just for one night. Someone has to keep an eye on you. I guess it'll be me. Officer Emmett suddenly realized just how much she cared about Kevin. It was platonic, of course. After all, she had a fiancé and Kevin was a married man. Kevin got off the stretcher and thanked the paramedics as he stepped out of the ambulance. He and Officer Emmett walked slowly to his car, but she stopped him as he was about to reach for the driver's side door. Oh, no, you don't. You don't think I'm going to let you drive in your condition. Officer Emmett helped Kevin into the passenger seat and went around to the other side to start the car. She smiled as she revved the powerful engine. They got to Officer Emmett's house in about a half an hour. When they walked into the living room, she pointed at the large recliner and said, That's yours for the night. Then she went into her bedroom and came back with a first aid kit. I'll leave this here in case you need it, Officer Emmett said as she put the box on the coffee table and put a blanket over Kevin. Then she pointed to a door next to the bookcase and added, The guest bathroom is right over there. Once Kevin was settled into the comfortable recliner, Officer Emmett sat down on the sofa. Kevin's phone vibrated, but he ignored it. Kevin, can you tell me what you were thinking when you blocked the bullet for that little girl? I wasn't really thinking about anything. I just figured it would be less dangerous for me than for her. Officer Emmett was touched by this. Although Kevin was trying to make it sound like a rational decision, she knew he had a heart. Just as he was almost asleep, his phone vibrated again. It turned out to be Phoebe Anderson sending him text messages. It looked like she'd sent him dozens of texts. Is there trouble at her antique store again? He decided to call Phoebe to ask her what was going on. Kevin, you finally saw my messages. It's been a busy day. Is there anything wrong? Do you need my help? Oh, I didn't know that you cared, Kevin answered playfully. Don't worry. It's nothing I can't handle. Then Kevin suddenly thought of something. Phoebe, since your family's got a lot of resources, have you seen any books about the healing powers of various gems? Why are you asking? I haven't seen any, but my father has an amazing library. I'll go take a look and get back to you. She didn't hang up, so Kevin put his phone on the side table while he waited for her to check the library. Kevin, are you still there?
Yup, I'm here.
What did you find? Phoebe answered a little nervously. I found a couple of old books he probably got from an estate sale. Do you need them now?
There's no hurry. I'll stop by tomorrow.
It sounds like you need some rest. I'll see you tomorrow. Phoebe hung up the phone slightly disappointed. When Officer Emmett woke up the next morning, Kevin had already left. Instead of heading home, Kevin went to his office at Williams Media. In just one day, Williams Media had already lost over $3 billion. When the markets opened in the morning, the stocks dropped so fast that they temporarily halted trading. Sir, if this continues, I'm afraid the company won't be able to hold on. Even if we can hold on, we have to try, Kevin said as he threw the stock reports on his desk. No matter what, the company has to hang in there. How much liquid capital do we have available? I want you to access all of it. Let's see how far the Williams family is willing to go. Yes, sir. I'll take care of that right away. She knew very well that Kevin's actions wouldn't help them at all. The Williams family was just too powerful, and Williams Media couldn't stand up to them without some outside help. In just a short time, not only Williams Media, but also the Whistler Hotel and the West Chicago International Group had suffered enormous losses. All over Chicago, countless small companies were facing bankruptcy. Kevin called Mitchell Cook and the others to come back to his office. They dropped everything and rushed there in less than an hour. Mr. Williams, how can you laugh at this? The Williams family is killing us, Adriana said in exasperation. Don't be so pessimistic. It ain't over till it's over, Kevin smiled. Then he asked Cook, Mitch, what have you found out?
According to what I've seen, the whole mess is being led by the Williams family. They have at least 20 other companies helping them, Cook said gloomily.
Mr. Williams, why don't we just give up now and cut our losses? What's wrong? Are you afraid? I'm just worried that when the dust settles, you'll end up losing Williams Media. Everyone at the table agreed. I appreciate your concern, but let's not worry about that right now. I don't want to lose Williams Media either, but I can handle it if that happens. What we need to do now is to stabilize the stock market as much as possible. Don't let it crash before 3 this afternoon. A strong coldness flashed in Kevin's eyes. Then he said confidently, we won't lose. The afternoon dragged on, while everyone watched the Williams Media and West Chicago International Group stocks fell again. But just when everyone thought that Williams Media wouldn't be able to last until the closing bell, there was a huge surge. Not only did it stabilize the stock market in an instant, but it also increased the shares of West Chicago International Group and the other groups by nearly 30%. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the major news agencies shared the breaking news. The CEO of KWTD Corporation, Tyler Dawn, had given his full support to Williams Media. The chairman of the Orion Group also said that he would back Williams Media. An unimaginable amount of money poured into the markets, and by the closing bell, their losses had been completely reversed. Williams Media stock had nearly doubled. I must be dreaming, Gilbert Rhodes said excitedly. That's thanks to the KWTD Corporation and the Orion Group, 2 of the biggest players in the business world, Amos Squire exclaimed as he slapped his hand on the table.
We aren't the only ones who have been saved. It's spilled over to all the other companies in Chicago.
I told you things would turn around, Kevin said as he sat calmly on the sofa with his legs crossed, sipping another espresso. Mr. Williams, how did you get these 2 corporations to support you? I can't believe you doubted me. They all felt a little embarrassed. You don't have to worry about it anymore. I just couldn't give up on Chicago. It's too important. But I'll still need your help. He asked them to stay at Williams Media and keep an eye on things while he drove to Anderson Antiques to see Phoebe. Over the past few days, the Anderson family's antique and jewel business was the only place in Chicago that hadn't been directly affected by the Williams family's manipulation of the stock market. When Kevin arrived at the store, 2 assistants met him at the door and escorted him to the 3rd floor. Kevin, you're finally here. Do you know how long I've been waiting for you? I'm sorry, Phoebe, I didn't know you were waiting this whole time. Phoebe saw that Kevin was sorry and her frown morphed into a pleasant smile. What is it you're trying to find out?
Please subscribe to the Pocket FM YouTube channel and press the bell icon for instant notification. Check out our channel for more such exciting shows.